So by now, you've probably already unboxed and set up your brand new iPhone 17, 17 Pro, or iPhone Air, but now you might be overwhelmed and wondering what to do next. Well, that's exactly why I'm here, because in this video, we're going to cover the first 24 things that you need to do. So the first settings you should change, the first features you should try out, and everything you need to know to get the most out of your device. And there are going to be many bonus tips and little Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the video as well, so stay alert. Okay, so the very first thing you need to do is make sure your device is actually new. And when I say that, I know I sound crazy, but you would be very surprised to see how many people think they get a new device, but it's not actually brand new. So we need to make sure yours is brand new so you can return it within that 14-day window if yours is not actually brand new. So to do that, we need to go into our settings, go to battery, and from here, scroll down until you get to battery health. And you want to make sure that your maximum capacity is at 100% and that your cycle count is low. So if you just unbox your device, the cycle count should be at 0, but if you've been using it for a little bit, it should be relatively low. I'd say less than 10 cycles if you've only used it for a couple of days or a few days. Now, while we're in the battery section, you also need to do a few other things. So first off, you need to understand that we have a brand new battery chart now in our settings. It's a lot more advanced, so now you can go into specific applications and see charts and usage based on specific apps, but we need to change a couple of other things in here. So first off, battery percentage is disabled by default. So if you want to see your battery percentage up here in your status bar, some people don't like that because it's anxiety inducing, but if you do want to see your battery percentage, that right there is where you enable it. Now also, if we go into power mode, we have a brand new mode called adaptive power with iOS 26. So the way this feature works is basically when your device detects that you're using more battery than usual, it will make performance adjustments such as lowering your display brightness for you. It will allow some activities to take longer, and it can turn on low power mode at 20%. Now, that sounds good, that will likely save battery life, but if you're somebody who wants to have full control over your device and you don't want things being changed automatically for you, you might want to turn that off since it is on by default. Now, me personally, I will be keeping that on. However, I will be turning off adaptive power notifications because I don't need a notification every time something like this is happening in the background. Now, if we go back to this screen, we also need to go into charging and change our charge limit. So by default, your charge limit is set up to 100%. That way, when you charge your phone, it charges up to 100%. Sounds logical. However, if you plan on keeping your device for multiple years, you might want to change this to something like 90%. That's what I typically keep my charge limit at. That way my phone only charges up to 90%, and that's just a little bit easier on the long-term battery health of your lithium-ion battery in your iPhone. Now, will it make a massive difference over like 1 or 2 years? Probably not. But after a couple of years, it could have an impact if you charge your phone up to 100% every single time. It's also why you see electric cars recommend you not charge up to 100%. It's just not as good long-term on the battery. So just keep that in mind, and you can adjust that based on your usage and how long you plan on keeping your phone. So for me, I'm going to keep mine set at 90% just because I prefer to keep my battery health at 100% for as long as possible. And I believe that is the best way to do it, or one of the best ways to do it. Now also, clean energy charging is turned on by default. I always turn that off completely. So what this does is it will try to reduce your carbon footprint by selectively charging when lower carbon emission electricity is available. So if you want to charge your phone, whenever you want to charge your phone, I would recommend turning that off, because sometimes if you had this turned on and you plugged in your phone, it would not actually charge until it detected that lower carbon emission electricity is available, and that can get pretty frustrating. So personal preference, but I will be turning that off. So this year, Apple did something they've never done before on the iPhone, and that is that they put a Pro display on non-Pro iPhone. So the base model iPhone 17 and the iPhone Air now get the Pro display, which is the 120 Hertz ProMotion display, which means that you have the always on display on those devices, and you also have the more fluid screen in general that goes from 1 Hertz to 120 Hertz. So the next thing you need to do is understand how that works, why it's actually different, and also adjust your always on display settings. So let's start with the always on display. Always on display is when you lock your device and you can still see certain elements, so like the time, the date, the background, notifications. However, you might want to change that. So if you go into your settings here, and then we go down to display and brightness, and then scroll down, you will see always on display. That's brand new if you've never had a Pro device before. So if you go to always on display, everything is selected by default. However, you might not want that. So you can turn always on display off as a whole if you want to. I think it's pretty useful, but it will save you battery life if you do turn the always on display off. Now also, if you don't want to have notifications showing up, you can turn that off because it can be pretty distracting when you could just always glance at your phone and see your notifications. So I will be turning that off. And then if you don't want your wallpaper, you can turn that off. And if you don't want it blurred, you can turn that off. However, I think both of those look pretty good with the right wallpaper. And if you've never had a 120 Hertz ProMotion display on your iPhone, basically the best way you can tell that it's 120 Hertz is when you scroll really fast on a web page, or anytime you just move really fast on your iPhone, you will just notice how everything is a bit smoother. Everything just feels smoother and less choppy than the 60 Hertz displays that we've had in the past. Now also, if you're somebody who prefers 60 Hertz for some reason, you can change that back. So if you go into your settings and into accessibility and then into motion, if we go down here near the bottom, we have an option called limit frame rate. And what this does is it will set the maximum frame rate to 60 frames per second. But I like 120 Hertz. I think most of you guys do as well, so I'm going to keep that disabled. Okay, so we have a pretty nice upgrade to the cameras on the iPhone 17 lineup. Even the iPhone Air got a nice upgrade in the camera department on the rear facing and on the front facing camera. So what I want to talk about right now is dual recording. So the next thing you need to do is try out the brand new dual recording mode on the iPhone 17 and the iPhone Air. So how you do this, by default, you will not see anything right here when you go to video that's new. However, when you tap on these dots up in the top right, you will see that we have a brand new option at the bottom called dual capture. When you tap on that, what this will do is it will bring up a screen of your front-facing camera along with your rear-facing camera, and you can record both simultaneously. So if I go ahead over here, you can see I have my face in there, and I also have these iPhones in the frame, and I can record that at the same time. So if I go ahead and start recording, you can see I'm up there in the upper right corner. However, something else you need to do and kind of just understand is that you can move this around. So you can actually move your camera around while you're recording. So you can change it before, and you can also move it around while you're recording, and that will adjust in the actual video file as well. So now if I go into that video, you can see it will show me right up there, and then it will show me as well as I'm moving that camera around while I'm recording. So the iPhone 17 introduces a brand new setting that people have waited many years for, and this has to do with PWM, which is pulse width modulation. So basically, if you've ever looked at your phone, especially in the dark, and you got a headache or you felt your eyes just kind of getting tired, it could be due to PWM. And PWM is basically the number of times that your display flickers. So OLED displays flicker to adjust the brightness levels, and this setting will disable that fast blinking, and it's going to lower the actual power going to the screen to make it darker. So let me stop getting technical for a minute and just show you where the setting is. So go into your settings, go to accessibility, and you want to go down to display and text size, and then scroll down near the bottom. You have a brand new toggle for the iPhone 17 series and the iPhone Air called Display Pulse Smoothing, PWM. And this is off by default, but if you're somebody who suffers from, reacting to PWM, you might want to turn this on. This should actually be one of the first things that you turn on your iPhone. And Apple describes it as this: disables pulse width modulation to provide a different way to dim the OLED display, which can create a smoother display output at low brightness levels. Disabling PWM may affect low brightness display performance under certain conditions. But of course, that last sentence is not even going to matter if you can actually look at your display now and not get a headache. So this is actually a game-changing feature for a lot of people who suffer from this, who got a headache every time they looked at their phone and tried to use it. So if you did, make sure you turn that on. So here's another first for Apple. So this year for the iPhone 17 Pro series, specifically the Pro and the Pro Max, Apple put the ceramic shield on the back of the iPhone for the first time ever. So we do have Ceramic Shield 2 on the front. So all of the iPhone 17s have Ceramic Shield 2 on the front. That's going to lead to 3 times better scratch resistance. However, and I'm sure you've seen it by now, so many people online are reporting that the iPhone 17 Pro, specifically in the Pro Max and also the Air, are very scratch prone. A lot of people are seeing major scratches on their 17 Pros and their iPhone Airs. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put a case on my iPhone 17 Pro Max so I don't scratch it up while I'm making this video. So I've been working with Rhino Shield for the past several years, and they continue to just improve on their already great case lineup year after year. So for the iPhone 17 series, they have 3 main styles, and I think you'll like the last one, but this first one is the Solid X case. It's the next generation of the classic solid suitcase, but just much better overall. So it absorbs 71% of the drop impact thanks to the shock spread eco material. So it's tough, but it feels great in the hand. And it's also lightweight, and it has some of my favorite buttons because they're so tactile and responsive. But we do also have the iconic clear case from Rhino Shield, which has a lifetime anti-yellowing warranty that they actually honor. This one allows you to see the glorious iPhone 17 colors while also being super lightweight at just under 32 grams. That's lighter than a half a slice of bread. But don't mistake that for weakness because it exceeds military grade impact protection and has passed extensive in-house lab tests. And then we have the ultra customizable and expressive Nod NX case. So this one lets you swap out the bumper and back plate whenever you get bored of your case design. And if you need full 360-degree protection, Rhino Shield also has the Impact Protector Pro screen protector that provides blue light protection and a simple install. So if you picked up an iPhone 17, you should absolutely consider a case from Rhino Shield. Right now, when you buy an iPhone 17 case, you'll get 40% off a screen protector and a free lens protector, which I don't think those are really that great, but you will get that for free. Plus, if you use my exclusive code Brandon at checkout, you will get an extra 10% off your entire order. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is understand how to actually work the center stage selfie camera. So this year, all the iPhone 17s and the iPhone Air get a massive upgrade to the selfie camera. So yes, it's now 18 megapixels, but what does that actually mean? Is it actually better? Yes, it actually is better, but only if you know how to use the center stage selfie camera, because it's honestly kind of confusing out of the box because you have these two buttons down at the bottom, and then you also have this button up top, which is on by default. So when you tap on that button right there, you will see two different options that are separated from each other. So you have auto zoom and auto rotate, and it says center stage can zoom and rotate to fit everybody in. So if you don't want it zooming, you can turn that off while keeping auto rotate on, and vice versa. You could have auto zoom on while having auto rotate off. Now, what auto rotate is basically if you have multiple people in a photo and you're taking a selfie, it will automatically rotate the orientation of that photo. So you don't have to actually manually change your, direction of your phone like this to fit more people in. It will take that photo in landscape mode, even if you're holding your camera up and taking it in the portrait orientation. So it's going to be smart now and understand that it needs to switch to landscape to fit more people in the frame. So it will do that automatically as long as you have auto rotate turned on. Now, auto zoom is also important as well because that acts like the typical center stage feature that we've seen in the past on the Mac and on the iPad. So you do want to have that on if you want the camera to kind of follow you around and keep you in frame. However, I will say that the center stage camera does also work on FaceTime. So you might want to disable that. And to disable that when you're on FaceTime, you just swipe up from the top right, and then in your control center, you will see camera controls up top. You will see that we now have a center stage option for the first time. So if you go to that, you can tap on that to turn it off, and you will know it's on when it's highlighted white with the blue around it. And you can also access this when you tap on your camera view and then go to camera effects, and we have center stage right there. So you can turn that on, you can see it working, or if you turn it off, it will go back to just showing where your front facing camera is actually facing. And by the way, the front facing camera now uses a square sensor, and that's how it's able to change between portrait and landscape mode, is because of that new sensor inside. And keep in mind, you can also manually adjust the front facing camera using this button right here, which will really extend the view. So it will widen the view right there. You can also tap this to change the orientation without actually, again, changing the orientation of your phone. So you can see when it looks like this, that means you're shooting a photo in landscape mode. When you shoot like that, it means you're taking a photo in portrait mode, which is usually just like a couple of people. But if you have more than like 2 or 3 people, you might want to press that and make it so that it is in landscape mode instead of portrait, so you can fit everybody in there. Or of course, if you have center stage turned on, it will do that automatically for you. But let's flip around to the other side, because this year the iPhone 17 Pros have something that the iPhone 17 or the iPhone Air do not have, and that is that we now have triple 48 megapixel lenses on the back, because the telephoto lens is now also 48 megapixels. So the next thing you need to do is try out the amazing 4x to 8x optical zoom. So now when you go to the screen, you will see that we not only have 0.5, 1, and 2, we also have 4 and 8. So now you can optically zoom in, which is going to give you better quality than digital zoom, to up to 8x, which is pretty crazy. And you could also digital zoom up to 40 X now on the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max. And by the way, you also need to know that this is not called the camera bump anymore. I know a lot of people are still calling it the camera bump, but technically based on Apple's verbiage, they're calling it the camera plateau. So start adjusting your vocabulary to just call this the camera plateau instead of the camera bump. And I do also want to mention that you can use the camera control to zoom as well. So if we scroll over here to zoom and go in, you can see that we can zoom up to that 4x and the 8x right there. So we can stop on 8x. There we go. It has a little resistance there as you stop right at the 8x, but you can use the camera control for those zooms as well. And I'll talk more about how to use camera control properly in a moment. Now let's talk about that camera control button, because if you did not have an iPhone 16, this is going to be pretty foreign to you. And this is also on the iPhone Air. So all the models this year did get the camera control, and it's about time to learn how to use it because it can be very confusing and very frustrating to use if you don't know how. So basically what you want to do first off is just understand the basics. So what this is, it's an actual button. So when you press in on it, it will take a photo, but you can haptic press as well. So if you push down without actually fully pressing down, you get access to different menus if it's enabled. So the first thing we need to do is go into our settings. So if we go into settings here and go into camera, you will see that up top we have camera control. If we go into that, it will show you what you can do here. So first off, you can change what actually launches. So if you want the camera app to launch, you could do that. Or there are third-party applications and other type of camera apps that you can open up right here. So I keep mine on camera. You could also choose the gesture to open up the camera app. So if you want it to be a single click or a double click, that is where you can adjust it. You could also go down here to camera adjustment. So if that's off by default, you might want to turn that on if you plan on using the camera control, because what that does is if we go ahead and launch the camera here, that allows you to do that press in without fully pressing. You kind of just push your finger in without fully pressing on the button, and that allows you to get to the menu right here to make adjustments while you're shooting, in this kind of position of camera control. So basically what you need to do is when you go into a menu, you just press like that to go into it, and then double press to go back to the main menu where you can go to different options here, like your photographic styles, your cameras, your zoom, all of that. So you press one time to go into it, and then you can kind of slide your finger across this camera control to use that function. Double press to go back to the main menu. If we want to change the depth, again, press on it. You don't actually fully press down. You're just basically haptic pressing. So you're pushing down, not pressing, if that makes sense. So pushing is where you don't use all your force. Pressing, in my opinion, is where you just press all the way down on a button as if it were just another button like the power. Now, of course, you can press to take a photo, but you can also press and hold to start taking a quick take video. So now, as long as you're holding on the camera control, like fully pushing down on it, it's going to start recording until you let go. Once you let go, it will stop that recording because that was a quick take recording. But I have to say that by default, the camera control button is very, very sensitive, and you might actually want to change a very important setting for this. So if you go into your settings here, we're going to go back out of that whole section, and we're actually going to go into accessibility for this one. So if you go into accessibility and then you scroll down, you will see that we have a dedicated section in here for camera control. If you go into that, you can change the light press force. So remember, the light press is not the full press down where you like take a photo. The light press is how you pull up the menus and how you kind of select menus. So if you find that to be a little off, if you want that to be like you only have to press it a little bit lighter, you can change that. Or if you notice it's too sensitive, you might want to change that to firmer. Me personally, I find it to be too sensitive, so I like to change that to firmer, and I notice it gives me a better experience. Now also you can change the double light press speed. So if you don't like having to double press super fast and not triggering, you can actually slow that down so you can double tap a little bit slower and it will still know that you're trying to do a double press. So I like keeping that on default. And then you also have double click speed. So again, click is where you fully push down and you take a photo. So if you want the double click speed to be a little bit slower, you can change that in here as well. Now the iPhone 17 Pros this year get a pretty major upgrade in terms of performance. So the next thing you need to do is understand that the iPhone 17 Pros now have 12 gigabytes of RAM for the first time ever on an iPhone. So basically you just need to understand, really the thing you need to do is just know that you can now multitask better than ever before. So multitasking will be better. If you're trying to export videos a lot, that will be better as well, especially if you have other applications running. But that kind of goes hand in hand with the next thing you need to know about the iPhone 17. The next thing you need to do is basically know about the vapor chamber cooling system inside of the iPhone 17 Pro, because that's really the whole point of having this aluminum unibody design. It's one of the major reasons Apple designed the phone this way is so they can fit a vapor chamber cooling system inside. And again, this is something brand new for Apple, and it's only on the Pro models. Now, on paper, it makes the iPhone 17 Pro heavier than the iPhone 16, but it actually feels lighter at times. But basically, this vapor chamber cooling system is going to help significantly keep the temperature down when you're performing intensive tasks, such as hardcore gaming, exporting videos, using Lightroom to edit your photos and export them. That can really be really taxing on the iPhone sometimes, and it gets really hot. But you will notice after using your 17 Pro that it does not get near as hot as previous iPhones, and basically the vapor chamber cooling system is a big reason why. So if you've had issues in the past with games and things not running properly, try it again on the iPhone 17 Pro, because I think you'll be pretty impressed. Now, the next thing you need to do on your iPhone 17 is something very important that probably annoys the heck out of you when you first get a phone, and that is that you need to configure your display settings, especially if you did not set up your device from a previous device. If you started fresh, you're absolutely going to want to change this. So go into your settings. There's a few things we want to adjust in here. So once you're in your settings, and then go down to the display and brightness section, and you want to change your appearance first off. So if you like light mode or dark mode, you can change that, or you can have it set to automatic based on the sunrise and sunset. I'm going to keep mine on light for the sake of this video. Now also, we have our brightness here. So brightness is important. True tone is also important. So if you want your display to adapt to the colors around you, you should keep true tone on. We do also have auto lock. I would highly recommend setting this to 3 to 5 minutes. In my opinion, 30 seconds to 2 minutes is too short. That's where your phone automatically locks out. It gets black and locks you out after not touching it for 30 seconds is the default. So I'd recommend raising that up. I would also recommend turning off raise to wake. So raise to wake is where you have your device off, and if you wake it up like that little motion right there, it will automatically unlock. However, the reason I prefer to keep that off is because that can inadvertently, reduce battery life. So a lot of people do that, and they wake up their phone constantly throughout the day on accident just because they pick their phone up in a certain way. So I find that to be kind of a redundant setting. If it's something you like, of course, keep it on. Just my personal preference, I would keep that off. We also have always on display right there, and the display zoom if you prefer to have larger text on your device. Now also, you might be wondering, where is auto brightness? Because that's also something pretty important. So if you go into your settings, go to accessibility, display and text size, down at the bottom, we have auto brightness. So this is something you will want to turn on, because auto brightness not only is great for adjusting the brightness for you, but also it's the only way that you're able to take advantage of the full 3000 nits of peak brightness on the iPhone 17s this year when outdoors. So yes, even the iPhone Air and the base model iPhone 17 can get the same 3000 nits of peak brightness outdoors as the Pro and Pro Max, but that's only if you have auto brightness turned on. So I recommend keeping that turned on. Okay, so it's about time to talk about this home screen here, because the next thing you need to do is make your iPhone yours. You need to make it customized to look not like everybody else's phone out there, which if you take a look at mine, I don't think anybody else's phone looks like mine, and that's kind of the point. I want you to customize your phone to look the same way. So you might notice that these wallpapers are not the default wallpapers. These are actually part of my Lustra wallpaper pack. It's a big collection of like 90 wallpapers. I'd highly recommend getting this because it looks so good with liquid glass. Even if you don't use the clear icons, it looks amazing with dark icons as well, and light icons. So if you want to check this out, it's linked down in the description below. I'll actually do a little 15% off code as well. So just say Easter egg. Easter egg will get you 50% off or 15% off of this wallpaper collection if you use that. I'm not going to put it anywhere on screen. Easter egg is the code. But check this out. There's something really cool you can do if you go ahead and haptic press on your home screen and you go to edit. So from here, we do have some new options like edit wallpaper, and things like that. But if you go to customize, we have something really cool if you go to the tinted section. So if you take a look at my icons, they look like they match my iPhone, and that's because they do, because now this built-in feature right here is that you could tap on this and it will color match your icons to the color of your phone. So that's pretty cool, but you can take this a step further and color match to your accessories as well. So if you have an iPhone case and you want to customize your icons on your home screen to be the same color as your MagSafe case from Apple, you can press that button right there to change that. However, I'm a big fan of changing the icons to match the color of the phone. I think it looks really good on this color right here. You can also change that between light, dark, or auto. I think it actually looks really good in dark right there because it matches the phone a bit better. So I think having a wallpaper like this on the home screen is the way to go instead of like a person or a pet or anything like that. But on the lock screen, it's a different story. I think that looks really good when you have like a significant other, when you have yourself, when you have your pet, your kids, things like that. And honestly, now it looks looks better than ever on the lock screen with the iPhone 17 and iOS 26, because if you haptic press right here, we're actually just going to create a whole new one, and we're going to find a good photo with a subject. So let's go into photos. Okay, so we have this photo right here, but there's a lot we could do with it, because right now it doesn't look that great, honestly, on the lock screen. So if we zoom to pinch out, like if we pinch out like that and kind of zoom out, check this out. You can see the time kind of going behind my head automatically. And already as I start to zoom out, it looks so much better. So we can kind of move it like this, so my head is barely in the time right there. But also we have something even better. If we tap this button right there, it will generate what's called a spatial scene. And what this does is it essentially turns your photo into like a 3D kind of parallax like object. So it gives you this really cool 3D effect as you move your phone around. So it responds to the gyroscope and how you're moving your phone to give you an amazing little effect here. And you can do this when there's a subject. You can really do this for any photo, but it really stands out when you have a subject in the foreground and something in the background. Oh, and here's something else you really need to do pretty quickly as well after getting your iPhone 17, and that is customizing the control center. So by default, it looks like this. You're missing a ton of good toggles, which by the way, you can see we do have a redesign here for iOS 26 as well. So basically what you want to do is haptic press right here and go to add a control, and then you can add some controls in here. So some that I recommend are going to be dark mode, for example. So a quick way to get in and out of dark mode is nice. I would also strongly recommend the hearing toggle right there. So what that does is allows you to get to background sounds. So let me just go ahead and haptic press on that. It allows you to get to background sounds along with live listen. So if you go to background sounds, this allows you to play some sounds in the background, like, if you like listening to rain at night, or, fire, boats, any of these sounds to fall asleep, you can turn those on straight from your control center, which is nice. And we have one more I want to show you. Low power mode is another one I'd highly recommend putting into your control center. Of course, you can also adjust the size of these as well with this little grabber right here. So if you use this grabber, you can make these a little bit larger if there's one you use more often than others. Okay, so let's talk about the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, because there is a must enable feature for these phones, and that has to do with the camera. So if you want to take full advantage of the camera, you cannot just leave it at default. There are multiple changes you need to make, and I will touch on those in a minute. But I think the number one thing that you need to change is go into your settings, go to camera. You're going to scroll down until you see formats. Go into formats, and you want to enable Pro RAW and resolution control. For some reason that is disabled by default, but you want to enable that, and then go into Pro RAW format and change the Pro RAW format. I prefer JPEG XL lossy, but you can choose whichever one you would like. And the reason I choose lossy is because it's essentially the same quality as JPEG lossless, but it takes up significantly less space. So it's going to save it as a DNG file. So it's going to be much more efficient with the codec, and everything like that. So it's going to be pretty much the same quality, but you're going to save space when you shoot RAW photos, which I would recommend if you have a Pro phone, you should be shooting in RAW when you're trying to take a good photo. So when you go back to the camera application, the way you shoot in RAW is tap right here where it shows HEIC and switch this format to RAW. You want to make sure it's at RAW 48 megapixels. And then when you take a photo, you'll notice that it takes a little bit longer to take that photo, but it will take it, and it will be much easier to manipulate when you shoot it in RAW format when you go to edit it, either in the built-in controller or in something like Lightroom. And you will also want to go up here to photo capture and make sure your photo mode is at 24 megapixels. It's like that by default, but in case you accidentally changed it, you want to always have 24 megapixels right there. Now, while you're in this section on the pros, you want to go to video capture and turn Apple ProRes on, because just like shooting RAW for photos, ProRes for videos is a game changer. And also ProRes encoding, I would recommend turning that to log. Again, that way you have more control over the colors. You can manipulate the colors a lot easier in your editing software of choice. You can shoot in HDR if you would like. I just think log looks better and allows you to really have more control over it. And I will tell you right now, ProRes videos are night and day better than default videos. So again, to do that, go into your video right here, tap up here where you have resolution, and you will see an option for ProRes up top. You want to choose log right there, and you want to make sure you're shooting that in 4K, and then choose your frame rate. Also, you'll notice up top here, it will show you how long you have left of recording in that format. So for ProRes log, obviously it takes up a ton of space on your device. You're only going to have limited time. Right now it shows I have 48 minutes of recording time available. Okay, so since we're on the subject of the camera, the next thing you need to do is make multiple important camera settings changes across the board for all iPhone 17s and the iPhone Air. So first off, pretty much the most important one in my opinion is in the camera section right here. Go to record video, and down to the very bottom of record video is lock white balance. For some reason, that is so overlooked by a lot of people. I would highly recommend turning that on. That way your white balance is not all over the place and it looks super unprofessional. I think you need to lock the white balance in order for your video to look professional. And then lock camera is another one I would recommend turning on. That way your phone doesn't switch between cameras while you're recording and give you that weird stutter effect. You might also want to go to record sound and change this from spatial audio. So I think spatial audio sounds good, but for some people, depending on, what they're shooting the video for, they may want to shoot that in stereo instead. And then also if we scroll down right here, we have a brand new section in iOS 26 called indicator. So this is something else you want to do to kind of clean up your camera application. So if you go into camera by default, you will see all these indicators up top. So we have our flash, we have the, live photos, all of that right there up top. But you can hide those now. So if I turned off flash and live photos, you just saw they were there, now they're gone. And we can access those by tapping on this menu, and that will show up down here on the menu. But if you want to clean up that top part, this is where you go ahead and disable some of these indicators. So me personally, I like removing all of them except for dual capture, which is the new feature we talked about earlier. And now you can see that when I go back, they are all gone, except for when I go to video, you can see that we have dual capture up there up top. And one other thing I think you should change is right here under camera, we have lens cleaning hints. So you might not need to change this. It is enabled by default, but just know that this exists. So basically, if you get smudges all over your camera, if you smudge it up, your phone will now tell you when you need to clean that lens. And of course, despite your device, you do need to change record video to shoot in 4K. You didn't pay all this money to get a camera to shoot in 1080p. So I'd recommend changing that to 4K at 30 or 4K 60. And also I prefer to turn off HDR, but you can change that if you would like to. And once again, these should be enabled. They are disabled by default. And if you want to keep your settings the same for the next time you go in the camera, you should go to preserve settings. That way your camera basically remembers what you had set. So I like turning this on for most of these. That way it remembers. Like the camera mode, for example, if I go into camera and I go to video and then I go out of it and then I go back into camera, you can see it stays in video. But if I had that turned off, that would not be the case. And that's kind of, the crux of preserve settings. It remembers what you did last and keeps that enabled or disabled. So go through here and determine what you want to always be enabled and turn these on. If it's like a case-by-case basis, maybe just keep those toggles off. And if you have an iPhone 17, at this point, you need to be shooting in 48 megapixels because once again, you didn't pay all that money to not shoot in 48 megapixels, at least some of the time. So what you need to do is go into your camera settings, go to formats, and then go to resolution control and turn that on. That is disabled by default, which means by default, you can't even shoot in 48 megapixels, even though you have a 48 megapixel lens. That's kind of crazy. So now if you go into your camera and you go up here to HEIC, you can change this to 48 megapixels. So now you can actually shoot a photo in 48 megapixels like you have. You can take advantage of the full resolution of that camera. So I'd recommend doing that. And honestly, the photo sizes are not that large. So 48 megapixels is just going to make your photos look better. Now, the next thing you need to do on your iPhone 17 is understand that we now have faster charging. So we can now charge up to 50% in just 20 minutes. However, here's the catch, and here's the thing you need to do. You need to have a 40-watt charger or higher. So 40 watts is the minimum you can have to enable the fast charging from 0 to 50% in just 20 minutes. So I will link some of my favorite 40-watt plus chargers down in the description below from Amazon. I would not buy one from Apple. They're just overpriced and it's pretty much the same thing. So I would just get a third party, but just know that you can charge now from 0 to 50% in 20 minutes on the iPhone 17 and the iPhone 17 Pro. However, the iPhone Air can only charge up to 50% in 30 minutes, and that's using a 20-watt adapter, not a 40-watt. Now, the next thing you need to do is change what the action button and the camera control buttons actually do. So for example, if we go into our settings right here and we scroll down, we do have a menu option for action button. And what this does is it allows you to perform certain actions by simply pressing on that action button on the side. So if you come from a device that didn't have this before, this is actually highly useful. It's much more useful than camera control, in my opinion. So some of my favorite ones to set this to are the flashlight. That way at night, you could easily just press that button instead of searching on your screen for a button to press. Flashlight's really good. Also, you can go to controls and choose use a specific control center control to activate when you press on the action button. So one of my favorites right here is actually setting a reminder. So now, I'm somebody who sets reminders all day long. So if I, press in on my action button, it will prompt me to set a reminder right there. I could do that, press a check mark, I'm done without ever having to go into the application or really doing much at all. So that's what I use it for most of the time, but you can change it to any controls. You could also choose a shortcut, or you could just have it do nothing, which I think is a waste. I think you should change this to do something. And then as far as camera control goes, I mentioned this earlier, but you can go into your camera and then into camera control. And right here under launch camera, you can change what actually launches when you press camera control. So you could have it be like Snapchat, for example, or Instagram. I could have that launch, even if you don't actually use it for all the gestures and everything. If you just want a quick way to launch one of your favorite apps, you can just press on it right there, and then it will go ahead and launch that application just like so, and it will open it up right to where you could actually post or a story. Now we're going to show the Air some love because we haven't really given the Air too much love. So let's talk about this, because the next thing you need to do is understand how to use photographic styles, and there's actually a new style this year. So if you go into your camera right here and you go into photos and you tap on your grid right here, you will see that we do have a styles button right there. If you tap on that, it will show you these different styles that you have, along with the tone, the color, and the palette that you see up top. Now these are fully customizable. So if you go into the square right here, this is how you can change the tone and the color. So if you take a look up top, this will change the tone and the color of that photo. So let me put it over something so you can actually see it changing. So yeah, you can see the color and the tone changing right there. So if you have a certain aesthetic, you can change this and kind of save it. That way all your photos look the same. It can be really nice. And then down here at the bottom, we have this little slider. That's the intensity. So that will not change the color or the tone, but that will change how intense that effect is that you have set. And keep in mind, you can add this after you take a photo as well. So you don't have to have this set up right from the get-go. You could change this after the fact when you go to edit a photo. So if we have it how we like, we could just go ahead and X out of it, and it will save that. However, I did want to show you the new one that we have here. So we have Cool Rose, we have Neutral, and Bright is the new one for iOS 26 and the iPhone 17. So now we have a new one called Bright. Of course, it does what the name implies. It just makes your photos a little bit more bright, and you can kind of change, the colors and the tone right there, along with the intensity of the new Bright photographic style. Now here's something else you need to do on your iPhone pretty much right away, and this might just be a me thing because I have multiple phone numbers and email addresses, but you want to remove your phone numbers and your emails from Messages, Phone, and FaceTime. That way you're not getting all these different notifications from these different emails and phone numbers. Maybe it's just me, but let me show you what I mean. So if you go into your settings here, we're just going to search for Messages and go into our Messages settings. And if I go down here under iMessage, we have Send and Receive. So as you can see, I'm able to receive messages from 5 different addresses. I may not want that. I may only want people contacting me from my phone number. So if I go into there, what you want to do is uncheck any of the emails that you might have or any of the other additional phone numbers you might have, and only set it to, what you actually want to be reached at. So I don't want to be reached at any of these emails. I only want to be reached on this phone from my phone number. That's it. And then in the phone application, it's kind of similar. So if you go into phone and then go to calls on other devices, I would recommend actually turning this off. So some people might like this, but I really do not like getting calls on all my devices. Maybe it's because I have too many devices, but I would recommend turning this off if you have more than like one device in your room. Otherwise, you'll see those calls on your iPad, your Mac. Every time you get a phone call, it will ring on all those devices. So could be useful if you're maybe, always busy or hard of hearing, but for a lot of people, I think you should turn that off. And this leads me right to the next thing you need to do on your iPhone 17, and that is to screen unknown callers and select Ask Reason for Calling. So what this does is if you receive a call from an unknown number, a number that you do not have saved, it will be an automated voice that asks them why they are calling and who they are. That way you're forced to see, who's calling and why, and that will show up on your lock screen and also in your dynamic island before the phone even rings. You'll see that notification without the phone ringing, and then after they say their name and why they're calling, it will go through, and then you now at least know who you're going to be talking to. And then the final thing you need to do on your brand new iPhone 17 is configure your screenshot options, because with iOS 26, screenshots are treated much differently than they were before in iOS 18 and on previous iPhones when you first get it. So go into your settings here, and we're going to go back and we're going to go into the general section, and you want to go down because we have a brand new option for screen capture. And in here we have multiple options to choose from. So we have full screen previews, which means that when you take a screenshot, it automatically goes into this full screen mode. You could turn that off off if you want it to go back to the old style. So if you turn that off, take a screenshot, it goes down there in the bottom left, and then you tap on it to bring it up to full screen. I personally like full screen preview, so I could easily mark it up. And also, we have visual lookup now on all iPhone 17 models, which is an Apple Intelligence feature, which means that you could circle something and it will automatically search it on Google. And you could also ask ChatGPT about what you see by tapping on this icon down in the bottom left. You could ask ChatGPT if you maybe have a screenshot of a plant, of an animal. You can ask ChatGPT, what it is or what you should do with a certain screenshot that you've taken, all of that right there. Also, we do have CarPlay screenshots. So if you have CarPlay in your vehicle, you might want to turn CarPlay screenshots either on or off. If you turn it off, that means that when you take a screenshot while you're connected to CarPlay, it will, only take a screenshot of your phone, which is where you took the screenshot, instead of the phone and CarPlay. So if you turn that on, it will continue to take screenshots of your CarPlay interface and your iPhone every time you take a screenshot, which could be kind of annoying. I personally keep that off. And then you do also have format down here. So you can now shoot photos or take photos, screenshots in HDR, so higher resolution screenshots. And this also applies to screen recording. So if you want to have higher resolution screen recordings, you should change this to HDR as well. And if you want to see more software-based features to change in iOS 26, I will have a video linked down below where I showed you the first settings you need to change on iOS 26. Those, of course, will apply to the iPhone 17 as well, but this video is more specific about the iPhone 17, so I tried to keep it that way. But if you want to watch that video, it will be linked down below. But anyways, guys, those are the first 24 things that you need to do on your iPhone 17, 17 Pro, or iPhone Air. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know your favorite feature of the iPhone 17. Also, let me know which iPhone you're actually using right now. Are you using the iPhone 17, 17 Pro, or the iPhone Air? What are your thoughts overall? Also, make sure you guys do check out Rhino Shield. It does really help support the channel when you support the sponsors here on the channel. I always try to bring you guys really good brands as well as sponsors. So I don't really promote brands that I don't actually like. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Enjoy your iPhone 17, and I will see you very soon.